The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Most listeners to this show need no convincing that there is a spiritual aspect to our existence and that it's possible to learn more about it from direct experience and from personal study. We turn to religions, to mystics, psychologists, paranormal studies, and the like to expand our understanding of our spiritual makeup. But who'd have thought an engineer could bring real cross-discipline insight to the quest? Well, our guest today is just such a person. Daniel Punzak, P.E., has a chemical engineering degree from Carnegie Mellon University and worked in the environmental field for over 30 years. And during that same time, he's been fascinated with near-death experiences and other aspects of soul and spirit. Now, before I introduce Dan, let me outline briefly what I learned his book is about. Traditional Western religion explains that each human has a spiritual aspect called a soul. Moreover, several passages in the Bible allude to humans having a soul and a spirit. Dan has explored this idea and found numerous modern psychological findings that support the notion. Also, shamanism and some Eastern religious concepts also support this idea. Diverse concepts such as creativity and mental illness can be explained by the idea that two spiritual forms are in each human. And through the study of diverse physical and psychological concepts, Dan has evolved an integrated overall theory of human behavior, which led him to author the book, A Spiritual Hypothesis, an inquiry into abnormal and paranormal behavior. Dan Punzak, welcome to NDE Radio.
Well, glad to be able to speak to you.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. I found your book to be... I was very impressed not only with the scope of the book, which is broad, very broad, but also how clearly and well written it is. We don't always have both of those factors in the books about near-death experience. Of course, this is a much broader range than that. Dan, tell us about how you got interested in this whole topic and how you differentiate spirit and soul.
Well, it's just from have read many things in various different fields, and I just happened to think when I was reading in one field, I say, well, this, even though nobody else seems to have drawn this connection, I see a connection between these various fields of study. And I should say that most of my, although I'm an engineer, most of my sources that I cite in my thing are either MDs or PhDs in psychology and that type, except for, of course, just your standard regular near-death experiences when they're describing them or something like that. But the researchers that I've evaluated all have advanced degrees.
Yes. Now the spirit and soul thing. Tell the audience about that.
Within the field of NDEs, I think the main difference is the one you just feel like you go out of your body. And I describe that as a soul phenomenon. It's your soul that's leaving your body. But then I'm saying you have this form called a spirit. And generally, the spirit is sort of hidden from you, but when you leave your body, and you have this NDE, when you're out there, you can actually ease more. When you're no longer in your physical body, it's easier for you to have an encounter with your own spirit form. And this manifests in various different ways. And this is where I got into the idea of creativity seems to be coming from this outside source too, and it just seems to flow into people from the outside. And many famous musicians have said that I just write down what I hear, and I'm not necessarily, composing and thinking of every note. I just listen to what I'm hearing. And also a number of famous scientists have said this, and mathematicians have said this formula just came to me. I wasn't even necessarily working on it.
Ramanujan from India said that a goddess unrolled a scroll for him, and he just copied down his mathematical insights. And others, I know what you're saying, and yet I have heard others say, well, must have been God or my guardian angel or the ghost of Mozart dictating these things. But you think it's actually coming from our own creativity.
Well, it's coming. I say it's coming through our spirit form. It's not. Some of the information may come directly from the spirit itself, but that the spirit has access to levels above itself, which we call, God and various other types of thing. I also discussed. I don't know if you're familiar with even the ancient Greeks talked about orders of. We usually say angels, but angels, like in the Old Testament, they used the term cherubim and seraphim,
yes.
Higher orders of angels with different functions. But this, when your spirit is activated, it can get information from any of those upper spiritual sources.
So, is it that there is a collective bank of knowledge, like the Akashic Record, and our spirit is able to tap into that? Do you think?
Well, usually when I think of Akashic, you could use that term, but I usually think of Akashic records as reading past information, whereas this is information that no other person has had before this or something.
Now, I believe you say in the book that the spirit is both outside of our body, like an aura or like our auras, and also within to some extent. How do you see that physical differentiation?
Well, I use various different terms. The one is, if you're familiar with this, may be New Age terms. If you've heard of etheric bodies and terms like chakras, that's one. So I use soul and spirit, but there's actually more than that. Then they talk about astral bodies. Well, I argue that the part of evolution is that this spirit form is slowly becoming integrated into our physical form, that it's throughout. In the past, it's been further and further away. Some people describe it, for instance, your etheric body extends so many inches from your body, and your astral body is further out. Well, the spirit form is further out, but I think it's slowly coming closer and closer to the physical body. And that's what's causing the evolution of consciousness and why people can think on much higher levels than they did millennia ago.
Do you see technology as evolving as a result of that, or more?
Yeah, I think many of these. Yeah, I think many of these scientists are tapping in, even though the scientists may declare themselves as not believing in spiritual forces. I think they're really getting their information from the spiritual forces, at least when it comes through these inspired moments when they just receive the answer without applying, what you call or mental type of thought.
Yeah, it is ironic that so many scientists are materialistic and don't really believe in an afterlife, and yet there some. As I think I do agree with you that a lot of their information is coming from a spiritual source.
Now, he wasn't necessarily a scientist who were coming through ideas, but just to show you my balance and things, one of my favorite sources was a medical doctor in England, doctor named Raymond Tallis, and he wrote a book called Aping Mankind, and he described himself as an atheist, but yet he says that the normal theories that the evolutionists are using, he calls it one of them Darwinitis, that people say that, the 100,000 years ago, people who believed in religion maybe survived more than those who didn't, so therefore religion and belief in the spiritual world survived, and that's why people still believe in it today. But that's one of them, Darwinitis, and the other was that we sometimes talk about this on materialism. He calls it neuromania, that people are saying, well, analyze somebody's brain. They put them in some of these machines, these PET scans or something like that, and they say, well, this is what's causing his behavior. And he says, well, that's kind of silly. He says you can have your brain can be activated whether it's thinking a good thought or a bad thought. The same area of your brain may shine up according to these lights. The way they show higher electrical activity.
What do you see as the relationship between our spirit, our personal spirit, and what Christians call the Holy Spirit?
I think there's a deep connection, at least in terms of what I call the after effects. When we talk about near-death experiences and some of these, some of the people that are involved, the Holy Spirit seem to show some of these same ideas in terms of abilities and so on like that. A lot of famous mystics, whether they're Christian saints from the Christian standpoint or other types of mystics, they seem to have these same abilities. That it is sort of the same thing. That what we call the Holy Spirit is really just activating the own spirit aspect of yourself.
So it's more than, say, the life force that when they talk about chi in Eastern traditions, it's more than that.
Well, chi is what they call an energy. Now, I did mention it briefly in the early chapter I discussed the kahunas, and they said you have these different forms, and they said there's a different form of energy for each of these levels. There's a soul energy and a spirit energy, and so on. So he described them as having a separate energy. So chi energy may be associated more with your etheric body and your soul or something, whereas these other energies may be associated with, like healing energies are coming from the higher spiritual realms, the spirit level.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the chapters in your book features near-death experiences, and tell us how you see the soul leaving the body and how it relates, as it does, with our spirit form.
Well, I think, most of near-death experiences occur, as a part of trauma. There are some, we have these spiritually transformative experiences that seem to be independent, but most of the regular NDEs are a form of a trauma. Your heart stops or you're in an accident, something like that. So I think that trauma just instantly, more or less, catapults your soul form temporarily out of your body. When I say temporarily out, you're always connected to it. For instance, that's when I think when they use the term in the silver cord or something like that it sort of connects your soul to your physical body. But so that's what I'm saying is your soul can leave your physical body even while you're still alive.
And does the spirit leave too? Or does that only happen when you die?
No, that only happens when you die.
Okay. And we talked a little about how creative energy seems to come through spirit. Some of your book is a discussion of how we can screw up our lives as well psychologically. Is that a manifestation of soul as opposed to spirit?
Yes, that's more a manifestation of soul. Although NDEers have been traumatized, when you have other types of trauma like child abuse, I discussed that quite extensively. In that case, your soul's left your body, but it's not. Although some people that have been abused have had an NDE at that time, but most of the people don't, and their soul's been so traumatized, and it really can't come back into your physical body the proper way, and it's not, more or less, not fitting into your physical body anymore, and so it can cause all kinds of incorrect thinking, whether it be emotional or your regular thoughts. So for instance, what I describe as mental illness, what the doctors are saying when they, I don't know if you saw this. I have to be careful. I'm not a psychiatrist, but when you're giving these medications, what I say is that the medications maybe can correct sort of what's going on in your etheric body, but if your soul has been traumatized and it's sending incorrect signals to your etheric body, then the etheric body is going to produce incorrect chemicals to operate your mental functions.
So do you see prescription drugs as sometimes being a problem and actually fixing the problem?
Yes, I have. I discussed two different sources on that. One was an investigative reporter, and he found a number of cases where people start off with a mild mental disorder. Like one was a small girl was traumatized, was worried about going away to camp for a week. She had never been away from home. So they give her some sedative or something. A year later, she's on half a dozen psychiatric medications because they responded wrong to them.
I know. I have some paranoid inclinations about big pharma and how one drug can lead to many, and how that just pushes up their profit some more. But let's talk a little about the differentiation between soul and spirit and how that can aid in understanding things like psychological problems and criminal behavior.
Well, again, it's because of your traumatized soul that causes these mental illness problems. And I guess one of the most controversial is that I say that if somebody else has left, if you leave your physical body and you're having problems at that time, whether it be addiction or whether you simply don't believe in the thing, your soul can wander around the earth for a while. And sometimes they're attracted to other people. For instance, I used the George Ritchie's example in his book about when he was during his NDE, and he said it was a Christ figure that took him around to various places. And one of them, he went into a bar, and he said he could distinguish the humans that had an aura of light that completely around their body, whereas these souls of deceased alcoholics were trying to get a drink, but they couldn't pick up the glass of water or the glass of the alcohol in it.
Yes.
So what happened, though, was that a couple other of the people that were drinking, the regular humans that were still in their body, and when they fell over drunk, that this aura that was protecting them just simply opened up, and some of these other spirits that were the deceased of humans, they went into that person. So I'm saying that's then he's going to have a much more severe problem with his alcoholism because he has these spirits influencing him to drink.
I had that.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I had briefly had that encounter with as a chaplain. I was with someone who died, and they tried to invade my body. Briefly, I had to leave the room and go out into the hall. It makes you feel nauseated, cold and nauseated, and just to tell that spirit, no, you don't belong here. You've got to go on. You've got to move on into the light. Yeah. So I can see where that.
People,
go ahead.
Go ahead. More people are becoming into this. For instance, I've heard nowadays, I often have speakers from hospice will talk about this, and I heard nowadays a lot of them will say to the person as they're nearly dying, they'll say, go to the light, and so on like that. So I think maybe if we understood this more, maybe more people would be prepared to go for the light, to the light as soon as they die. Or the other is we say go to the light or look for a deceased relative. That's the other option, is that if you're deceased relatives have led a good life and they're in the light now. They'll be there waiting for you, and you can just look around for them.
Yes. I've recently had a couple of people on the show who have been contacted by spirits who need their help to cross over, to complete the journey into the light. And they wind up either praying for them or meditating on their situation. I mean, the people who were my guests, so that they feel they have been able to aid the soul in its transition. Of course, the Tibetans pray, and there's even a Catholic tradition of prayer for the dead. What do you think about what if our spirit as well as our soul leaves when we actually die? Where's the spirit for these ghosts who are stuck here? Why isn't the spirit itself helping the soul to move on into the light?
Well, a lot of cases, the soul itself makes the decision. For instance, and again, another part of George Ritchie's NDE, he saw these souls that were having trouble, but he says they were so engaged. One of them, several souls were fighting among each other, but then they couldn't kill each other because they were already dead. They were just soul forms. But he says there were always spirits above them just wanting to help them, but these souls in distress were simply refused to look up and ask for help. If all they have to do is ask for it.
They're that close. Howard Storm had a story like that where he's being dragged down by spirits, souls actually. You know, he thought they were not demons, right. They were humans, and came to mind to him at that time an atheist to ask for Jesus' help, and immediately he was helped. Right. And so it's available, but I guess we have to make that conscious decision.
And the other one is, I have a pretty big section in my book, I think it's like 15 pages or so, called The Inner Self-Helper. This was one of the most severe form of trauma almost is the childhood abuse, especially before age 7, that results in what we now call dissociative identity disorder, but was once called multiple personality disorder. But a lot of therapists have found special, they just call it another personality, but the term, one of them developed the word inner self-helper, that it's there to work with the therapist and to help the client reach integration, which is more or less getting rid of the extra personalities that shouldn't be there. And I think that was one of the most intriguing parts of my thing about how this whole hypothesis was that this, I believe this inner self-helper is the spirit forms that it's willing to help, but it has to be called upon. It can't just interfere, because if it interfered, for instance, if a child was abused and it simply corrected the situation, well, then another person would continue abusing them. There would be no consequences for it. So if we believe we have a free will, then we have to believe there are consequences for the actions.
You're saying as we spiritually evolve that the spirit part of us is moving closer to us. Do you think the ultimate goal is for the soul and the spirit to merge into one?
No, I think that in one sense they're a different sort of a vibration, and that they I don't know that they I mean, when your soul goes into your spirit, and if you believe in reincarnation, probably only the spirit aspect would reincarnate it. But I do talk about reincarnation. That sometimes I question it, sometimes it seems reasonable, but it's only the spirit form that comes back.
So then, what happens to the soul?
It just sort of dissipates, and sort of like, the earth we call recycling or composting something, and something goes back to the soil. Well, they call it an etheric body. Well, it's made up of a certain vibrational frequency, and it just goes back to that, and then can come back as another. But it's not, has no memories. It's completely, there's just a separate world of etheric substance.
Mm. You mentioned something in the book called soul fragmentation. What's that about?
Well, that's where that causes this trauma of various types, causes this soul form to not be integrated into your body the way it should. It's been sort of disconnected, and it can't get back in, and it just is fragmented. That term is sort of a variation. The shamans referred to almost all illnesses, whether physical or mental, as due to soul loss. So, but I just thought that sometimes we use the term in our society if somebody's a lost soul, so I didn't want to use that, so I just changed it to soul fragmentation.
I see.
That it's not, that it isn't fitting into your body the way it's supposed to, and therefore it's giving incorrect signals to your etheric body as to how it should function.
There's a bishop of the Greek Orthodox Church in Crete named Docilas, who spoke of elementals, of when we think good thoughts or pray good thoughts or send out angry thoughts. There are actually like little mini spirits that leave our body and go off and actually can help or pollute the world. I was just wondering whether those fragmented souls were a similar idea.
Well, sort of, but I think it's that term, Daskalos was his name, but his term he called them elementals. In other words, humans have these multiple forms, whereas elementals only have one function. And but I think with these elementals are what attract these wandering spirits around. So in other words, they're attracted, when I mentioned addictions, that they're attracted to they know that this person has a problem with alcohol, so that's why they hang around the other persons with alcohol, because they can sense those elementals, or another term for it is thought forms. Some people prefer the term thought forms if elemental is hard to understand.
Yes. And I guess finally, when a person has a complete near-death experience, they often say that they felt themselves at some point merging into the light. If that is just their soul, then where does the spirit go?
Well, that's the soul. The spirit is appearing to the soul as this light, but it's the light is more or less more what we call a physical manifestation of the spirit form. So
it's our own better self that we're merging into in that situation?
Yes, I would more or less say that, yes.
Oh, that's very interesting. Wow. Well, Dan, this upper form has access to levels above itself, so that's why there can be so many variations, because one may be the spirit form has access to various levels, so one person may be accessing one level and another one's accessing a different level. I gotcha. Dan, we're out of time. Tell our audience how they can get your book.
Well, it's available through both Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Okay, and it's a spiritual hypothesis, an inquiry into abnormal and paranormal behavior. And it's a very interesting book. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. I want to tell our audience that if they want to listen to this show again or any of our past shows, they can go to our website at nderadio.org and hit the past shows button. And for information about IANDS, just go to their website at IANDS.org. And be with us again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.